Folks, we are so back. I've been spending the past couple of weeks stuck on a phone because my computer was busted. So, shout out to the people who were willing to help out during that time. A month of layover actually turned into 2 weeks. And as rough as that couple of weeks was, I was still putting out a couple of videos from my phone, although ones that clearly weren't meeting my usual quality metrics. There's a lot of quality metrics I was dealing with being compromised, having to do things on my phone. In fact, I've been having to do dailies on Genshin on my phone. I've had a week of that at a time before, mostly when I've gone to Atlanta and didn't think it'd be smart to bring my entire computer setup when I'm going to be spending most of the week outside of the loft I'm in anyway. So, it's whatever. 2 weeks is a little bit different because it's long enough where I can't really wait on events I want to do. So, I was basically doing the bare minimum of that and focusing on things that were a little easier to do on my phone. Of course, at the start of it, you have to realize where my brain was in terms of panic of playing like this. Because I was expecting this to be my play pattern for much longer than it was. And a couple of days into the first week of it, considering, that sort of panic I was dealing with, I just kind of hit a revelation that led to this video. Isn't Genshin Impact, supposed to primarily be a mobile game? So why is the mobile experience this bad where I'm panicking over playing it for an extended period of time? Yeah, sorry for the clickbait, but, it's not that Genshin is a bad game in general. Genshin Impact is a terrible game for the primary platform it's actually made for. Some of what I'm going to say are talking points that other players that aren't primarily on mobile have been saying for quite some time, but I do have things to say that, at least as far as I'm aware, haven't really been talked about, or at the very least, not in the way that I'm doing it. Okay, so let's start with the fundamental reasons that Genshin doesn't work on mobile. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of locking games out of being on mobile, because I get that making a game right to work with mobile should be possible if you're good enough at designing the controls. But some genres do have inherent disadvantages when the primary control method is a touchscreen you're supposed to be viewing the game through as well, because your fingers are going to be blocking part of your view in order to be prepared to, control the game. This is why most mobile games tend to be some form of casual experience. A puzzle game, a card game, an auto battler or idle game, some kind of city builder, stuff like that. Even most of the more hardcore experiences tend to fall more into the realm of turn-based RPGs, or, like I said, city builders. And I'm not saying that an open-world action RPG can't work on mobile, but it comes with inherent disadvantages, especially when you have to be able to both move and look around at the same time. The way Genshin does this is the way a lot of 3D perspective games, I think, would try to do it. On one side of the screen is the movement stick, and if you drag anywhere else, you move the camera, along with buttons on the right side for, all the things the game you'd actually be using buttons for, attack, switching characters, stuff like that. This is actually one of the key points that make the game really terrible feeling. And while I've seen games work with very similar control schemes to this, I think Genshin is one of the worst examples of doing this, especially once you compare it to the PC controls. And that's actually in spite of there being a lot of similarity, where your left hand is doing one set of actions and your right hand is doing the other, and that's based on what controls are on the keyboard and which ones are on the mouse. For most people, it would be the right hand that's on the mouse, and that does seem to be the default that Genshin is running with, too, so that's what I'm going to be operating with as I explain this. See, there's an overall theme of what you do with each hand. Your right hand handling attacking and visibility, with the left hand handles movement, which includes stuff like switching characters and dashing. The real issue with the mobile scheme as it is clear. Your left hand is doing a lot less, only doing one aspect of movement, the basic running and walking, which leaves the right hand doing a lot more with only a limited number of fingers to handle everything. Really, the one big thing that would make this better is if the dash button and character switching were on the left side, even just the dash button for that matter. But doing that runs into the problem of having less space to handle actually the moving part of movement, and really only, if you're using your thumb, only using your thumb to do both the movement and the dashing, which makes dashing in a particular direction really bad. So really it's like there's too much the game is asking you to be able to do at one time for a mobile game. So in a way, the fact that Genshin even needs character switching and dashing at all is part of the issue. Even an FPS could work on a mobile device, honestly, when you do the controls right, but that involves simplifying the actions you can do in-game to accommodate for the fact that your controls are on the screen. I mean, the issue really gets solved by giving the mobile game controller compatibility, don't get me wrong, but that's more a patch onto a bad system than anything that makes this system better, especially since, you know, for most people, you're still playing the game on a super small screen, and there are going to be a lot of details to look at, but although that does feel more like a skill issue to me. There's actually a particular aspect of the controls that's specifically relevant to the Lantern Rite event, because I think it really communicates why this issue even exists. One of the minigames was in Mortal Kombat, which is Tetris Attack. It's basically just Tetris Attack. I really don't know how else to put it here. And, I mean, that should be really easy to make a good mobile controls for, right? Just drag left and right to move the block, drag down to move it faster, maybe flick down in order to snap a piece in place, and tap to rotate a piece. I mean, that's kind of what we got. There's a dedicated rotate button on the right side of the screen, which is fine because we can actually drag anywhere else on the screen to move the piece, which is really good. But, well, then there's the way this method of control works. See, when you drag left and hold in the same position, the piece continues moving left. What this results in is overly sensitive piece movement that feels like I'm playing Tetris with ice physics. I saw opponents be able to snap down pieces, but well, for the life of me, I never figured out how to do it, and dragging down to get the piece down faster sometimes resulted in the piece moving left or right if I wasn't very careful about dragging straight down. See the ice physics point from earlier. The basic result is that I need to flick left and right to move one space at a time, and couldn't drop pieces quite as fast as I wanted to once I had the piece I wanted to place, which to some degree feels like I'm using an analog stick to control the game. Say for, you know, still not knowing how to snap a fucking piece down. Now look, I don't know about you, but what this tells me is the central reason why Genshin is so bad on mobile is the controls in the mobile version are practically an afterthought. They let the game do all the functions, sure, but in terms of play feel, it's clear that the PC or console experience is a lot more important. I mean, considering they had to change the way the stick interface works to function wherever you tap on the screen in the first place, it would be easy to even do something that put buttons for left, right, quick drop, and snap drop instead of using the stick control at all, which would still control a lot better. But they kind of just unlocked the location of the movement keys already in the engine instead, which tells me that other versions of the game are given more care than the mobile version when it comes to controls. In spite of being advertised as a mobile game, the way these controls work tells me one distinct thing. It's not meant to be, it's just there because the gacha genre is expected to be mobile friendly. And I'm getting this indication from more than just the controls. Like, okay, clarification for this point, I do not have a weak phone that should barely be able to play the game. It's a Samsung Galaxy Flip 4, and there hasn't really been issues with performance running a lot of games on it other than some of the inherent issues of the Flip smartphones that are why my next phone probably isn't going to be one. It was the latest model 2 years ago. I'm sorry, but the game should not be easier to run on a computer with a GT 1030 graphics card than a phone that was state-of-the-art 2 years after the release of the game. And to be fair, when I'm playing for a few minutes and not doing anything else, that's exactly what happens. So I thought, you know, let me try to do some Genshin gameplay recorded on my phone for videos during this time, and this was still at the point where I was expecting to at least one more mobile video, and hey, if I'm doing the Genshin video, the video about how Genshin doesn't play well on mobile, and releasing it from mobile, that does fit. I ended up deciding to just use running through the Lantern Rite story as the gameplay, since I was a little bit embarrassed by my performance doing much of anything more action-oriented. My phone was hot as fuck, and after a bit, I started running into dropped frames. Primarily during cutscenes. Keep in mind that my mobile MTG Arena gameplay was much smoother than this, and I felt less like I was gonna burn my hand holding the phone. There wasn't a storage space issue either. I made sure there was plenty of room for these recordings, but my phone handled recording and playing Genshin at the same time far worse than even the previous computer that I've been using for 5 years did. What this tells me is the game isn't optimized to run on mobile hardware very well from a technical standpoint either. None of this is even to say that Hoyoverse isn't capable of making a game that plays well on mobile. Honkai Star Rail is a great example of this, albeit one that falls more into the categories of games that more naturally work on mobile devices, since it's a turn-based RPG. But you know what? I can do you one better than that. They made a character action game that I felt ran well on phone. I speak a lot about Genshin and Star Rail sometimes in this videos, but one game that I haven't talked about much is Zenless Zone Zero, but that's an entirely different story. But the other one that I haven't talked very much about is Honkai Impact Third, and that's because, personally, I don't really like it that much. It actually has nothing to do with the gameplay, but for my money, the story itself kind of needs to do huge, unnatural lore dumps to make any kind of sense, and still feels difficult to follow. I'm sure someone will claim that I'm just not paying attention, but that's not me knocking other people for having an easier time getting into it, but it kind of feels like from the beginning I'm coming in the middle of something that I have no business in, if that makes sense. The funny thing is that the platform I initially played those first few chapters on was actually a phone. And knowing I was probably going to have less of a good time with it, considering it was more of an action game. But the opposite wound up being true. The gameplay itself was actually really fun on mobile. My issues with the game stem from feeling like there was too much being introduced all at once story-wise, rather than anything to do with gameplay. And this game does have a lot of the features of Genshin, albeit a little bit less open-worldy. I haven't really tried Zenless Zone Zero on mobile either, because considering that even on PC I'm finding myself wanting to use a controller, I feel like I'd be better off sticking to PC. But I think what I've just said has shown exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to Genshin. So, what do you think? Do any of you play Genshin on your phone? Do you have a good time with it, or do you have complaints to add to what I was talking about? I'm not the biggest expert on mobile games, so if there's something I'm missing on why Genshin doesn't feel very good on phone to me, and for that matter, are there other games that you would recommend playing on mobile that are similar? Insert Wuthering Waves here. Leave your gripes, bitches, and moans in the comments, and hit the like button on your way out. Thanks for watching, and until next week, this is your effing Boonslayer signing out. Yeah, I'm kind of working on the outro a bit.